Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 100, The Boca Story.
Woo!
Woohoo! Is exactly right. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Sylvia, without any input from her husband Morty, puts a deposit on a condo in Boca. Initially, Fran is ecstatic, but then she finds herself with insomnia, and Maxwell suggests that she discuss her feelings with her therapist. After calling 30 wrong Dr. Millers in the tri-state area, Fran connects with her therapist at 5:30 a.m. Ultimately, Fran realizes that she's afraid of missing out on time with her mother, but she can't bring herself to ask her mom not to move because the condo brings Sylvia so much joy. The Sheffield family, Fran included, head to Florida so Maxwell can judge the Miss Universe contest. After Fran gets Maxwell disqualified as a judge, he has a surprise for her. They're not going right to the airport. Instead, they're going to swing by her mother's future condo. En route, Maxwell asks her if she's considered what good could come from Sylvia moving to Florida. And Fran realizes that with her parents out of town, there'd be one less obstacle standing in the way of her and Maxwell progressing their relationship. Unfortunately, as soon as she's excited about her mother moving, the family discovers that there are no condos and that Sylvia has fallen for a scam. Back in New York, Sylvia unwittingly interferes with Fran and Maxwell's flirtation, contradicting what might have been had the condo actually come to fruition. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
I do not.
All right, would you like to take us to scene 1?
Yes, so we open up in the kitchen. Maggie and Brighton are eating breakfast at the table. Fran walks down the stairs and she's sneezing. And she's talking about how her allergies are so bad today. Listen to how stuffed up I am. And uh or how stuffed I sound. And Maggie's like, "How can you tell?"
Right.
And then Fran's asking about where all the tissues are. She thought, and she holds up a Kleenex box like she thought it was full. At that moment, Gracie walks in with a good morning, and it becomes clear where the tissues have gone. As again, she appears to have how do I developed overnight.
Correct.
And again, I think Gracie at that point asks where the double stuffed Oreos are, and Brighton's about to make a comment, but he's cut off with, "Shut up, Brighton."
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so I believe Gracie leaves before Fran tells everybody, she's very sensitive right now, so don't make comments. And then Brighton, of course, it's like, right, because I guess Gracie's kind of wanting to develop, like she's kind of in a hurry.
She's eager.
Thank you. And Brighton's like, right, and in a couple of years, maybe Maggie will be going through it. And of course, Maggie kind of slaps him on the back of the head.
Mm-hmm.
And Niles walks in, and he is talking about how he doesn't know how he will get through this day. He's going to be the only remaining single friend, his only remaining single friend called to say that he was getting married.
Yep.
Fran is like, "Oh, Niles, you poor thing. You're probably feeling so vulnerable and insecure, like a big loser. Welcome to my world, baby."
Mm-hmm.
Side note, that's not the most comforting to have someone call you a loser. But anyway.
No, but she's saying that he's in good company.
Yeah. And so Niles is like, "It's just that I'm lonely, Miss Fine. You don't know what it's like to be the only one of your friends who's not married." And Fran's like, "Hello." And Niles is like, "And over 40." And Fran's like, "Oh, not a clue."
Exactly.
Over 40 thing. But again, side note, Fran has Val. So anyway.
I know.
So Fran continues like, "Oh, Niles, how I wish that the woman of your dreams would just come walking right through that door." And who should walk in through the side door of the kitchen at that moment? Not the person I was expecting, honestly.
Fair.
It's actually Sylvia who walks in at that moment. And she kind of announces herself by saying, "Ugh, I have been tasting garlic pesto for 2 days now."
Mhm.
Not the most like attractive way of
No,
entering a room.
no.
Um, but Niles kind of looks at Fran and is like, "Would she ever leave Morty? What am I saying?" And Sylvia just goes on to say that she just won a contest and she's on her way to pick up 19 inches of heaven. And Fran's like, "I'm so hoping it's a TV." And
Mhm.
Sylvia says it's a brand new Sony Trinitron. She just had to fill out this questionnaire on retirement.
Mhm.
And um and so like Fran takes that to like kind of look over it. In the meantime, Niles kind of sidles up to Sylvia. "Have you eaten breakfast?" Sylvia's like, "What do you think?" And Niles is like, "Then you'll want just a little nosh." And from
Mhm.
behind, he pulls out, I believe it's a chocolate cake, like a slice of chocolate cake
Yep.
or some type of dessert. And um and Sylvia gasps, "I love you." And
Mhm.
and I love that perfume. Good God, man, get a grip. So Sylvia is like trying to get Fran to come along, come on, Franny. Pickup is by I think like 3:30 or so, and or 3 o'clock. And Fran's like, "Ma, this is a scam. Like they're trying to convince you to like put down a deposit for a place in Boca." And then she starts kind of thinking about it. "Oh, let me grab my bag." Because again, there's been several references throughout the seasons of the dream of her parents moving to Boca at some point.
Mhm.
And that is the first scene. Again, going back to, do you know who I was expecting to walk in the door at that time, Debbie?
A voluptuous blonde.
Yes, that is
A
not
different,
Sylvia.
a different voluptuous
Different
blonde.
voluptuous blonde. Exactly. Do you have anything to add to that opening scene?
I do not.
Okay, can you take us to the next
Pitch.
scene at the
Yeah, so
meeting?
we're at the pitch meeting, if you will, for the Boca condos, and there's a presenter showing a video, and he's explaining that an average day at Sun Lake Village consists of waking up, God willing, to breathtaking beaches, lush foliage, and unspoiled vistas. And then like the video continues, and Fran and Sylvia have been joined by Yetta. Ooh, Tony Roma's. And the guy, like they're pointing at the video. And the presenter continues, just 6 minutes from a Loman's, a 24-hour Cadillac dealership, and the best prostate man in South Florida. Yetta turns to Fran and says, "You see that guy in the front row?" Fran's like, "Yeah." Yetta's like, "I'll bet he's got great hands." Fran's like, "Yetta?" And Yetta's like, "What? One of us has to be able to open the pickle jar."
Mm-hmm.
And so Fran is like, "Oh, okay." And then she turns to her mom and she's like, "Well, what do you think? This place looks fabulous." And Sylvia's like, "Oh, I couldn't make a decision like this without discussing it with your father first." And then the presenter guy's like, "And now, for those of you who are ready to make a deposit, please, you'll join us for complimentary coffee and cake." And Sylvia changes her opinion on a dime. "You know what? I'm my own person." She gets up, starts approaching the guy. "Do the appliances come in avocado?"
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And yeah, uh, marital decision making at its best.
Yes.
Do you have anything you want to add?
I do not.
All right, take us to scene 3.
Yes. So now we are in Maxwell's bedroom at night.
Uh-huh.
Maxwell is sound asleep in his bed, and Fran comes in. Side note, she's in a robe, but she still has her full on makeup and hair, right?
Mm-hmm. She
So she
does.
comes in, kind of, goes up to the side of the bed. She's like, "Mr. Sheffield, I know that it's really, really late, but I couldn't sleep. And I was just hoping that you might be up," or something like that. But she
Yeah.
kind of shoves him.
And her voice gets louder with the word
Yeah.
up.
Yep. And so, of course, uh, he startles awake, and Fran's like, "Oh, were you having a nightmare?" And Maxwell, having just woken up, is like, "I think so." I was dreaming I was in my bed and an incredibly sexy woman came in and bloody woke me up.
Mhm.
And Fran, of course, says, "You think I look incredibly sexy?"
Yup,
And
because that's
anyway,
the
Max
part.
was like, yeah, right. Max was like, "Just what are you doing?" And Fran explains she has insomnia. And and she is not quite sure why, but she's having insomnia and she'd like I'd
And
be
she
there for you,
correct.
if this were to happen to Maxwell. Again, Maxwell's asking her why she has insomnia, and Fran's like, "I've been feeling frustrated, and I don't know why." And she starts. She's at this point on the bed with Maxwell, and they're kind of like in a position like right next to each other, and she's like rubbing his chest,
And she has
right?
her head against his shoulder. She's like,
Yeah,
she's
all
cuddling
cuddled up
him.
with him. Yeah,
Hmm.
and so Maxwell, he also kind of starts kind of rubbing her arm.
Right. He
I
like
don't
puts his arm
rubbing
around her and
his arm and is like asking, "Oh, when did this start?" Um, and she goes, "Oh, 4 years ago." And that's not correct. Oh, the insomnia tonight.
hmm
So Maxwell's like, "Did something happen?" And Friend's like, "No, no, no. It was a perfectly normal day. Manicure, pedicure, facial for Gracie. She had a
hmm
big play date." And then, I went there and my mom put in a deposit for a condo in Florida. Then we went to Bloomies. And and again, um Maxwell's like kind of asking her questions like, "Oh, could that be part of it?" And Fran knows that the Boca like condo is 1,372 miles away, roughly.
roughly.
And Maxwell's like, "Did it occur to you that might be, what you're worried about?" Um, and Fran kind of like scoffs at that, like, "So not." And Maxwell suggests that maybe this is something that she should talk to Dr. Miller about. And
Mhm.
Fran's like, "In therapy?" And Max was like, "Well, what do you do every week in therapy?" "Oh, do you just like talk about me?" And he says it in a way that, like, obviously you're not just talking about me in therapy. And Fran has that look on her face, like, "Oh, yeah, right." She's obviously
Mhm.
talking about him in therapy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So again, here we get like the first signs that Fran is actually unsettled by this new development with Sylvia and Morty. Uh, is there anything you'd like to add to that scene?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Would you like to take us to her conversation with Dr. Miller?
Right. So we have the scene is told through like different scenes because obviously they're on the phone, Fran's in the kitchen, and Dr. Miller's at his home. Um, and so Fran greets him with, "Hello, Dr. Miller. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." We flip to him. He's like, "Oh no, not at all. I'm always up at 5:30 in the morning." And like we see him like flush a toilet. So like
Mhm.
not ideal. And he's like, "But and how did you get my home number?" And she's like, "Well,
Mhm.
let's just say there are 30 Dr. Millers in the tri-state area that are a little PO'd at me." And he's like, "Okay, Fran, like, what's the emergency?" And she's like, "Dr. Miller, last night my dream came true. I couldn't sleep, so I went into Mr. Sheffield's room, and while we were in bed, yes, like we see him like pluck a nose hair out, and he's like, yes, like very excitedly. And she's like, "Don't get excited. Just on the night when I should have been jumping for joy, I wound up miserable." And Dr. Miller's like, "It's not that unusual when two people fantasize for a long time about something and it happens, that it's not uncommon for them to feel let down. The question is, what about your feelings? Were you completely satisfied?" And Fran's like, "I think so. I mean, it's what I've always dreamed of. You know how long I've wanted this." And he asks her, "Did you feel the earth move?" And she's like, "Doc, they're moving to Boca, not Antarctica." "Excuse me?" says Dr. Miller. And she's like, "My parents are moving to Boca. Why aren't I happy?" And he says to her, "Fran, it is a long and sometimes painful process separating from one's mother, but you have to understand you must do that in order to become a mature, healthy adult." Meanwhile, there's a knock on his door and he says, "Mother, I am in session."
Yep. And like Fran clearly heard that on the other side of the phone as well.
Absolutely. All right, would
But
you like
yeah,
to take us? Oh, do you want to add anything?
just the observation that he has that phone like hooked up in the bathroom, which seems like an odd place to have like a phone.
I just want to say that, like, I remember as a kid going to hotels and there'd be like a phone in the bathroom, and I was like, "Ooh, fancy." I
Oh,
think that's
really?
weird. I,
Interesting.
I'm trying to remember. I mean, I don't think that's an actual memory from my childhood because I probably would not have noticed the phone in the bathroom. There's some television show where a family goes on vacation and like there's a telephone in the bathroom, or
Huh.
or maybe they're not on vacation. There's a bathroom phone and someone's response is, "Don't you ever call me from there."
Yeah. Well,
Which
because it was just odd to me because it's like a corded phone.
was it? I honestly I
Or
didn't
it
pay
might have
very.
been cordless, but it was like a full on.
It was a real phone.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
with you
Like
there.
you would normally think of it being like in the living room or kitchen kind of phone, right?
Yeah. I thought it was cordless, which made it even weirder.
Sorry.
But
Yeah.
either way, that's
Either way,
weird.
it lives in the bathroom.
Exactly. And
Looks
it would
on
be
the
covered
wall.
in germs and grossness. No, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Anyway,
It's
we
okay.
next move to the living room in the Sheffield residence. Fran and Val are there, and Fran's talking about, like, I don't even know why I keep going to that Dr. Miller. I mean, listen to what that man says to me. For a woman my age, I have an abnormal connection to my mommy. What's that? And,
Mhm.
Val's like, kind of like, oh, yeah, he's so wrong. You know, now if you were staying at home on a pull-out couch, then you'd be, and Fran interjects, you. And Val kind of is like, oh yeah. Um, but uh Val talks about how she doesn't know how many years, and then my note cuts off.
Yeah.
Do you
So
recall?
Fran actually says, that man is wacko. Do you know how many people would kill to have a relationship like I have with my mother? And Val's like,
Mhm.
well, I mean, let's face it, she's not getting any younger. You don't know how
Oh
many
yeah,
years you have left together. You got to appreciate every precious moment.
yeah, and that totally causes Fran to have like a freak out moment of like, I don't want my mommy to move away. Like,
Hmm.
And Niles walks in at that point and he's carrying a plate that has some type of like dessert looking thing. I
Yep.
couldn't tell precisely what it was. But Fran sees it and she says, "Give me my antidepressant." And Niles is like, "No, they're mine."
Hmm.
And at this point, Cece kind of walks in from the back of the living room, kind of where the piano and, well, that back area.
Yep.
And Val's like she's talking to Niles like, "Will you just stop? Just because your friend is getting married and you had, um, and you, what does my note say? You aren't, something like that.
Yeah. So she
Uh,
says, just because your friend's getting married and you're not, you don't exactly make tons of money.
you should be happy you don't have a wife to support."
Hmm.
Cece, of course, hearing Val saying this to Niles is like smirking, like right behind him. And Niles is like, on that note, and I think at that point he takes like a big bite of the dessert. Is that
He
correct?
does. He does.
And so Cece, of course, feels the need to kind of join in the conversation at this point. Oh, poor Niles. Always a best man, never a man. Hey, what do you think will be the hardest part, watching your friend kiss the bride or standing or starting every sentence with, no, I don't have a date? Uh,
Hmm.
and then she kind of goes on. Uh, and Niles at this point says, I was thinking of asking a tall, voluptuous blonde, but she's moving to Boca.
Hmm.
So Cece's like, oh, you are pathetic. All right. If you're that desperate, I will go with you. And Alice is like, that doesn't sound like you. Did someone leave that on your answering machine? And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, well, now you can just forget it. I wouldn't go with you if you begged me. And Alice is like, pick you up at 8. And he's like, 7. We'll have drinks.
Mm-hmm.
And then the doorbell rings. And again, Fran, I think, goes to get it.
She does.
And she as she's going, I think she's still talking to Val, like, oh, Val, what will I do with my mom? Like, I'll miss the hugs and kisses and all that kind of stuff. Where do I get the warm, fuzzy feeling? And Val's like, because she doesn't like shave her chin or pluck
Wax
her
her
chin,
chin. Wax
wax
her
her chin.
chin.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And at that point, Sylvia and Yetta come in. And they're obviously in the middle of an argument because Sylvia's telling Yetta, there's no way you're not putting brown pebble linoleum in my mauve. And I didn't catch
Gray.
quite the entire description. But
Gray and
essentially,
mauve. Nouveau riche
gray.
condo.
Yeah. And Yetta's like, well, remember whose $350 a month Social Security check is paying, the mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
And Sylvia is going back and forth and saying, well, this is more appetizing. And yet is like, you need more appetite, um, kind of shading Sylvia there.
Mm-hmm.
And Sylvia defends herself like, Dr. Artenberg says that I have a sluggish metabolism. I have to eat or I will die. And if I
Mm-hmm.
die, I will put in my will that you are not to put this brown pebble, and I'm gonna have to ask you for what the word
Fakakta.
actually. Okay,
Fakakta.
because the subtitle said caca, which I was like, I don't think that's what they
That is
said.
not it, but it's similar concept.
Yeah, linoleum. Uh, and Fran turns to Val and is like, I can't tell her to move, not to move. Look how happy she is.
Right.
Again, totally a contrast to like the argument that is currently unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to that scene?
Nope.
Okay, can you take us to the kitchen?
Sure. So Fran's in the kitchen. Maxwell comes in and says to her that he is a wonderful surprise that the entire family is going to go to Florida for the weekend. Fran is, standing behind the island and she's making herself a sundae. And Fran's response is, Florida sucks. And he's like, Miss Fine, do you really think that sundae can replace your mother's love? And Fran says, no. She takes a cherry, plops it on top and says, now it can. And Maxwell's like, look, you've got to come to grips with your mother moving. And Fran's like, I'm trying to, but every time I turn around, something else reminds me of her. And like it cuts to Gracie, who's still wearing her tissues, the tissues in her shirt. And we see she's eating an Oreo, she drops a crumb and she like picks it up, puts it in her mouth guiltily, kind of like Sylvia would do. And Fran's upset about that and crying. And Max is like, do I start yelling or will those things disappear on their own? And Fran's like, look, she's just taking them out for a spin. Would you just think of them as training wheels? And she calls Gracie over. And from Gracie's shirt, she extracts a tissue so she can, dab at her nose and eyes. And she sits down at the table with her sundae, and Maxwell tries to convince her to come with them to Florida, saying it'll be fun. We're traveling first class, big shrimp, free slippers. We'll be staying at the Mountain Blue, and your palatial suite has its own jacuzzi. And Fran's like, on the terrace? I don't care. I'm not going. And he's like, Miss Fine, I understand. Well, we'll be back on Monday morning after I finish judging the Miss Universe contest. And that perks her up. She's like, well, maybe it would be better for me to be around people.
Mm-hmm.
So she has been convinced to go.
Yeah. And I think partly too, it's like she probably doesn't want Maxwell to go there by himself.
Oh,
Too,
that is
right?
entirely it.
Yeah. Yep. And so then we fast forward and we're now in Florida at the Miami Beach Convention Center. And like it's obviously kind of, I guess, like the backstage area or somewhere where a lot of people are milling about. Maxwell's taking a picture with Miss Norway
Oh no, I
and
think we,
comes up after he's done with that. And Maxwell, sorry, well, Maxwell sees Fran. I mean,
yep,
he says, "Pretty girl, huh? You know, her platform is the environment." And
yep.
Fran says, and she, like, so she walks, Miss Norway walks by, and Fran looks at her and she says, "You can tell she's had her whole body reconstructed from her country's natural resources."
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
Um,
don't think you like that comment.
yeah. Maxwell says, "Little jealous, are we, Miss Fine?" And Fran's like, "Please, I've had glimpses of a couple of their mothers. I know where they're headed."
Hmm.
And Maxwell's like, "Speaking of mothers, you're handling your future separation well. I'm very proud of you." And, Fran's like, "This has been a great diversion. Um, the plane, the shrimp, watching booty call, thank you. I haven't really had the opportunity, or like, I didn't catch what she hasn't really had. I'm assuming this kind of distraction or diversion in a while."
She hasn't even thought about mom.
Yeah. So Maxwell's like, "Oh yeah, I'm always there for you." And of course, and Fran's like, "Oh, I know." And she starts saying, "You're such a great friend." And that at that time, of course, is when Maxwell goes, "Oops, they need me to take a picture with Miss USA." And he's kind of like eager to go take that picture.
Hmm. Yes.
And so off he goes. And then a woman approaches Fran, and she introduces herself as Alicia Machado, Miss Universe. And Fran's like, "Oh, hi, from Who's the Boss?" And Alicia's like, "No, that is Melissa Milano." But I get that all the
Alyssa.
sorry, Alyssa Milano. But I get that all the time. And then so Fran, can you fill in that, because my note doesn't
Yeah.
quite make sense.
So Fran sees someone walking by and starts crying, and
Oh, that,
the Miss Universe is like, "¿Qué pasa, chica? Why are you crying?" And Fran's like,
mhm.
"I just saw a contestant that reminded me of my mother."
Yeah, yeah, and
Ooh,
then she says, "Miss Hungry,"
yup,
instead of, Miss Hungary. I will say that's like the oldest joke ever when it comes to Hungary. Um,
yes,
but she says it more like hungry versus Hungary, if that makes sense.
yup.
And so of course, like Miss Universe is trying to like comfort her. And she p- did she say like poor baby or
She
something?
does say poor baby.
Yeah. And then I think, is she the one who then talks about like the handsome judges?
No, so that's the camera kind of flips and we see that Maxwell's talking to Miss USA and asks her, "What
Oh,
interests
oh, Miss
you?"
Miss USA. Yeah, Miss
Yes,
USA is talking, and she's flirting with Maxwell by saying about, all the handsome judges. And so
yeah.
but Fran kind of comes up and to Maxwell and is like, she wants to go home. And
And so she says to him, "Mr. Sheffield, I want to go home. I have to tell Ma that she can't move." And Maxwell is not listening to her at all.
oh yeah, he's distracted.
Oh, yes. And he says
Yeah.
to her, "It sounds delicious. Why don't you make reservations?"
Yeah. Yeah. Which is not great, right? So
No.
uh so she kind of goes up to someone else who's clearly like an organizer of this, right?
Hmm.
Oh, the judges are doing such a wonderful job. Like his cousin's a little nervous, implying that Miss USA is Maxwell's cousin, so there would
Hmm.
be a conflict of interest.
Yup.
And that's the end of that scene, unless you want to add anything else.
Just the official looking person's like his cousin.
Uh
Like,
huh.
yeah. Fran says that, your judges are, I want to say what a wonderful job your judges are doing, especially that one over there. His cousin's a little nervous. He's giving her a few tips on how to win this thing.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah. Okay. So then in the next scene, we are in the rental car. And Maxwell cannot get over what happened. He's like, what on earth would make them think that I'm related to Miss USA? She's bloody Hawaiian, for God's sake. And Fran's like, well, maybe it's a blessing in disguise. The British aren't exactly known for picking the most attractive people to wear a crown. And yeah. And so like the kids are in the back seat, Fran's in the front seat next to Maxwell, who's driving. And Maxwell quietly asks her what happened to Grace's new figure, that he hasn't seen it since Disney World. And Fran explains, Space Mountain, they blew off into a galaxy far, far away. And so then with a louder speaking voice, Maxwell asks Brighton, are we going the right way? And he's like, yeah, just make a left of that old lady. And Maxwell's like, we're in Florida, which one? And Fran's like, oh, I don't remember taking this long to get from the airport. I mean, maybe I'm just anxious to get home and talk to Mom. And Maxwell's like, Mom, it's fine. I have a little confession to make. And before he can make his confession, Maggie, who'd been sitting in the back listening to like her Walkman, is like, I thought we were going to see Sylvia's condo. And Fran's like, stop the car, grabs the wheel. And Maxwell's like, Miss Fine, are you trying to get us all killed? You want us all to die? And she's like, well, when in Boca? And he's like, look, I just thought that if you saw your mother's condo and the beautiful lifestyle she'll have, that maybe you'd be happy for her. Did you ever think that some good might actually come from your mother moving away? And so then we go into Fran's mind and we see the scene. Did you count this all as one, or did you break it out?
I counted it all as one.
Okay. So we have the scene in the kitchen, and Fran is in the kitchen, and Maxwell comes in, and she says to him, oh, Mr. Sheffield, I've been so lost in small left. And he's like, really? She's like sitting at the table, and he like strides over at her. Really? I feel wonderful. He stands her up. I don't know what it is, Miss Fine, but I feel so much closer to you since Sylvia left. Fran's like, Sylvia who? And he's like, Miss Fine. They're embracing each other. And he's like, Miss Fine, I'm not sure how much longer I can control my feelings for you. And she's like, well, wait 3-4 seconds and let her rip. And he's like, I gave Niles the day off. And he's like, where are the children? She's like, I should know that, shouldn't I? Oh, they're at school. They're at school till 3. He's like, so there's nothing to stop us. I mean, your mother's going to be dropping by, is she? And I think they kiss. And then Fran, we cut back into the car, and Fran's like, Ma's moving to Boca. Ma's moving to Boca. And she's like super excited. And then Brighton chimes in with, according to the map, we should be there by now. And Maggie like rolls down her window, looks out, and is like, there are no condos around here. This is a complete and total swamp. And like reality hits Fran. She's like, oh no. Oh my God, no. And Max is like, Miss Fine, I think your mother's been taken for a ride. Fran's like, no, you know what? We'll get her deposit back. And as soon as possible, she'll put another down payment on a condo in Boca as soon as possible. Did I say that twice? And Gracie's like, I'm car sick. I think I'm going to throw up. And Fran's like, Christ. And yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything?
I do not.
All right. Would you like to take us back to the kitchen?
Yes. So we're back in the kitchen, and Fran is making another sundae. And Maxwell's asking her, why the sundae? And Fran's like, because my mother's not moving to Boca. And then we start kind of replicating her little daydream. Niles, oh, he has the day off. Where are the children? And she starts kind of catching on, like that this is starting to sound familiar. And so she's getting kind of excited. And she starts saying, oh, like, I think school or whatever. And then, of course, Sylvia walks into the middle of them. Like, she's like right in between them. Kind of. And she takes some of the sundae. This is delicious.
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry. Maxwell first takes a bite of the sundae. This is delicious. Um,
And then he offers it to Fran, saying, "You want to try some?" Which I think
yeah.
is so funny.
And
She made the Sunday.
got a little chocolate or something. They're flirting. And sorry, that's when Sylvia steps in. Um, and she kind of has her hand to her chest. I've been tasting Kung Pao beef for 2 days now. Obviously, breaking the mood.
Absolutely.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to put a little more color on their flirting. So
Yeah.
like Maxwell picks up the sundae and he's like, "This is delicious here. You want to try some?" She's like, "Yeah, okay." And he like spoons it into her mouth and he's like, "Isn't that good, huh?" And she's like, "Oh boy, you got a little chocolate on your little mouthy." And she's like touching his face, trying to get the chocolate. It's so cute. And then Sylvia destroys the moon. That's all I wanted
Yep.
to add.
Yep.
And then
For the last scene.
it's not really a scene, it's just before the credits. It's the cameras pointed at a big cake that says the Nanny 100th episode, and you hear Fran's voiceover. Sorry, I totally skipped. You're right. You're right. I'm sorry. I skipped right to that. I apologize. We're in the kitchen and we're focusing on Yetta's face, and she's saying, "Almost there. Yes, yes." And then we turn to the guy. He's holding an open jar. It's the guy from the pitch meeting. And he's like, "Just give me 20 minutes to recover, and then I'll open up the applesauce." And she like takes out a cigarette, lights it. Ooh.
Yep.
He did have great hands. She was right.
Yep.
And sorry, yeah. Then there's the last scene. Go ahead. I kind of already ruined it though. Sorry.
Oh, no, you can go ahead and say it.
There, as I said, there's a big cake that says the Nanny 100th episode, and Fran's voiceover saying something along the lines of, "Thanks for 100 great episodes. Here's to 100 more." And Sylvia's hand reaches in to grab some of the frosting, and she's like, "Ma!" And then the hand comes back and grabs more frosting. And that's the episode.
Yep, it is.
Do you have anything you want to talk about before we get into our shticks?
I think I kind of pointed out some of this stuff as we were talking. Do you have anything?
No. I'm sure what I
Okay.
want to say will come out later.
Okay. So let's jump right into favorite fashion. Did you have any favorite fashion this episode?
I did. I really liked the multicolored, like the sunburst dress that Fran was wearing when she was talking to Val. It's yellow and orange and blue, and she has this great yellow headband. What was weird is that it was long sleeve but a short dress. I mean, that's also her style, so I shouldn't say that's so weird, but like, I don't know. The bright colors don't really go with, you don't think of bright colors when you think of winter dresses. I just thought that was really cute, and I really liked that. That was my favorite thing. My least favorite thing she wore, I think, was what she was wearing in the first scene. She's wearing like a crop top with long sleeves, and has these like tassels hanging off it, like all over the place. I did not like that look. How about you?
I didn't really have a favorite outfit. I did want to note, like in the scene with her like daydreaming, I believe that's the scene. They're like behind the kitchen counter at first. And so I really thought she was wearing like a swimsuit top. Is that the scene? Am I thinking right?
I think that's the scene where Fran was making the first sundae.
Oh, the actual Sunday. Yeah, because didn't it was like a swimsuit top, wasn't it? Looking.
I'm trying to remember. Remind me, what color was it?
Oh, I think it was black, maybe. I don't know. I'm not as
So
great at remembering.
she had a couple different weird things.
100 fashion. Yeah, it was just because I wasn't quite sure what the season is.
Yeah, that's what I think caught me with the sunburst dress. I know in one of the scenes she's wearing, I think it's, maybe it was the fantasy, but she was wearing like, it was like black and gray with like matching pants, I think.
But yeah, but whatever outfit I'm talking about, like it was super short, like not a crop top. It was kind of like a a
bikini
bikini.
top.
Mm-hmm. And I can't really find it right now, unfortunately. But anyway, it just caught me off guard because until she like walked around and you see, no, she had full on pants on. I was
Right.
like, is she wearing a bathing suit? Like, I
Well,
don't
she
know.
very well could have been just with pants.
That's true.
Um,
That is true.
did you notice that she was wearing, so in the car on their way to what's supposed to be Sylvia's condo, she was wearing the same dress she wore last week. The white with the zipper down the front.
Oh
The one that
yeah.
she was compared to a stripper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hadn't put two and two together, but now that you say it, yep,
I try
makes
to help.
sense. Yep. Any other fashion you wanted to talk about?
I don't think so. How about you?
I do not. So shall we jump into notable New Yorkers?
Yes, we should.
I feel like generally speaking, like, and we'll see when we actually get into it, like, there don't seem to be as many. Like, there's still some references, obviously, and blatant ones, but I don't feel like a ton.
I agree.
Uh, Because, again, like, sometimes, we have a very obvious reference in the title, but the Boca Story could be many different references, right? Or do you have a particular one?
I thought it was just a reference to Boca, where she's desperate for her mother to move.
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of like, sometimes they imitate a style of a title, right? Like it's a direct reference to a different type of title. And I couldn't think of because there's so many different types of stories out there and in the title of other things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I didn't think there was one here.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Um, so again, I we learned Sun Lake Village is not a real place unless something's come up since. But before that, did you write down brand new Sony Trinitron as one of your things?
Sony Trinitron was a line of aperture grill based CRTs, which were used in TV sets and computer monitors. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Hmm.
By the way, you missed Oreos. They're a delicious sandwich cookie that are vegan
But they're
by
double
accident.
stick Oreos too, the best kind.
I
Are you? Yeah, I
I
was gonna
think
ask
I'm team.
you.
I think I'm team original.
Interesting. Well, because I tend to like the filling.
I do too, but also it's like sort of this game. I mean, actually there was a scientific study that was done. I don't know, a few months ago that concluded that there is a correct way to eat Oreos.
What is that?
Give me a second. Is there? Yeah. So, wow. Apparently, it was more than a few months ago. According to maybe this isn't what I was thinking of, but according to our friends at tasteofhome.com, they have an article from, oh, it was updated in 2023. Okay. If you're wondering how to eat an Oreo the right way, take a tip or two from the official Oreo team. So you are supposed to, the twist, lick, and dunk method is the Oreo team's, I'm reading verbatim, tried and true approach. Twisting the cookie halves apart, trying the layer of cream, and then dunking the Oreo into some milk is what the brand swears by. I do not agree with that.
How do you eat an Oreo?
I take the top off. I separate the two pieces. I eat the piece that has less cream first, and then I eat the
Mhm.
piece with the cream. Because you're
Yes,
right, the
that's
cream is
how I
the
do it too.
thank you.
I don't dunk anything in milk.
I don't either. Although, I mean, having a glass of milk might help. I usually just have them with water because that's usually what I'm drinking at the time.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. We eat them the same way, Debbie.
This is why we're friends. We didn't even
Yeah,
know it, but this is
that's
why we were friends.
that's obviously the basis of our friendship is how to eat Oreos.
We get down to what's really important.
Oh yeah. Okay, so moving on. There's a couple of things that they mentioned that we've talked about before, like Tony Roma's,
Yep.
Loman's.
Yep. Cadillac.
And yeah, like all of that, I believe we've talked about before.
I agree.
So, again, we kind of fast forward. I don't see anything in like uh the next scene. Did you have anything in the scene where she wakes him up?
Nope.
Okay. And then again, we continue, and then
The
let's
next one
see.
I have is the Miss Universe competition.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I quote, a global inclusive organization that celebrates all cultures, backgrounds, and religions while creating and providing a safe space for women to share their stories and drive impact personally, professionally, and philanthropically. And that's according to our friends at missuniverse.com.
The next one I have is Booty Call.
Yep, 1997 movie about friends who set out to have sex after a long dry spell. That's according to our friends at IMDb.
I assumed that Alicia Machado
Machado.
was actually Miss Universe and making kind of like guest appearance.
Yes.
Is that correct?
A Venezuelan American actress, beauty queen, singer, and TV host who was Miss Venezuela in 1995 and Miss Universe in 1996. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Who's the boss?
We've talked about it before, but not in a while. So it was an American sitcom that aired from 1984 to 1992, which starred Tony Danza and Alyssa Milano, about a former baseball player who seeks to raise his daughter in Connecticut, where he works as a live-in housekeeper for an advertising executive. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yeah, and you already kind of then mentioned Alyssa Milano was obviously the actress in Who's the Boss.
Yes, she's also an American actress, and obviously actress. She's well known for her role in Who's the Boss, Melrose Place, Charmed, and My Name is Earl. She's also best known for her role in the Me Too movement, which began in October 2017. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yeah. I will note it was Miss Hungary, Hungary, not Hungry. Two different things. But yeah. And obviously Hungary is a country in Europe. Moving on, then there is a reference to Disney World.
Yep, an entertainment resort complex in Florida that's near Orlando. And do you want to guess what year it opened?
Like 1954, I don't know.
Not too far off, 1971.
That's a couple years off.
You're only 17 years off. You weren't even a whole like adult off. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
That's your unit of measurement. It's whether you're an adult off or not.
I mean, I figure it works. So,
and of course, Space Mountain.
an indoor roller coaster at Disney World with an outer space theme, and that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
And the Galaxy Far, Far Away as a reference to Star Wars.
Yes, it is.
How to open up the credits, the opening credits. So yeah, and then I mean when Fran's singing Ma's moving to Boca, like that's a familiar cadence, right?
It is.
Did you write down?
I didn't know where it came from, so it's it's a cadence that I feel like
yeah, that's the general what it's based off of. And yeah, did you have anything else?
I did not.
Okay, like I said, it felt a bit lighter.
It did. It absolutely did.
Okay, so now time for some Unishikop.
So I'm going to start where I usually start. Shrimp is not kosher. That's how part of how Maxwell was trying to convince Fran that she wanted to go to Florida with them. Again, shrimp is not kosher. It is not a fish with scales and fins. So that's part one. Part two, nosh, we've talked about before, but it's like a little snack. It's a snack. Fakakta, that's the word you wanted me to pronounce. It means lousy or ridiculous. And that's according to our friends at jewishlanguages.org. And then the big one is Boca. And according to our friends at jewishboca.org, in 2018, the Jewish population of South Palm Beach County consisted of 134,000 adults and children, and those people were within 69,000 households, which was a 3% increase from 2005, which was the last time they did like the Jewish census, if you will. I mean, so obviously the data I'm looking at is like 20 years after this episode aired, but it's still worth noting. The community is it has a significant proportion of retirees and senior citizens, but it was getting younger in 2018 versus how old it was in 2005. Let's see. They have a lot of they talk a lot about like the children, but that's not as relevant here because we're really talking about, you know, Jewish retirees moving to Boca, which is obviously Fran's dream for her parents. Yeah, so I just thought that was interesting. They do a census about every 10 years. So they've got about 5 years to go till the next demographic study. So
interesting.
Yeah, that's from jewishboca.org, which is also known as the Jewish Federation of South Palm Beach County. So
okay,
I think that's everything.
Okay. So some 90s nostalgia.
Old cars.
Yes, we do see old cars. Again, that phone in Dr. Miller's bathroom.
Correct.
He would definitely, again, it would be a cell phone. And just the fact that Fran called up a bunch of people, she was obviously looking in like the phone book.
We actually see the phone book.
Yeah, and like it's not really a thing anymore. I remember as a child though, when we would stack up the phone books to sit on, like at the chairs in like the kitchen to be a little taller.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't think I've seen a phone book, like a physical phone book, in many years.
I've seen them. I have not used them. And I feel like their higher tech replacement, aka a phone or a laptop, would not have the same boosting effect as a physical phone book.
Yeah. And like I feel like these days too, like you can set your phone that if it's someone's calling and they're not already a pre-existing contact, that it goes straight to voicemail. So I think Dr. Miller could have avoided that early morning phone call
Yes.
with that kind of setting.
Oh yes. A 19-inch television as a reward.
Yeah.
That seems pretty small by today's standards.
Oh yeah, very much so.
How about Yetta's $350 a month Social Security check paying the mortgage?
Yeah.
Every part of that sentence feels dated at this moment.
Yeah. At the presentation, like that pitch meeting, you know, the TV, and then like it's there, the video, I think it's on VHS, most likely. Like that whole presentation is very dated.
I mean, that guy's suit, wasn't he wearing like a salmon colored suit?
Well, and I feel like to the extent that it might be easier to investigate whether something is a scam or not these days in terms of like Googling or like,
I
I
feel
don't
like
know.
it would be both easier to investigate, but also easier to fake these days.
Yeah. 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 It goes both ways.
I have one more. Do you have any others? I think mine might be.
It depends on what your one more is.
Okay. Val says to Niles that he should be thankful he's not married because he doesn't make tons of money, and so it's better that he doesn't have a wife to support. That feels so dated. Earlier this year, the Pew Research Center released, and I'll read you their headline: in a growing share of U.S. marriages, husbands and wives earn about the same. And so they have this great little like chart, and they're showing that wives are gaining economic influence while carrying a heavier burden at home. And so they're saying for opposite sex couples who are married, the share of marriages where the husband was the primary or sole breadwinner went from 85% in 1972 to 55% in 2022. For those who have egalitarian earnings or were in egalitarian marriages, That went from 11% in 1972 to 29% in 2022. And the share of marriages where the wife was the primary or sole breadwinner went from 5% to 16%. Again, in that 50-year time span. So yes, there's still a bit of a differential, but that gap is closing.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people kind of do depend on like the two income kind of household, right?
Yes.
To pay for all the bills and stuff. Um, so I do have some more.
Okay.
So the fact that they were using a map to find the place,
good one.
like a physical map. Now I remember as a child, like before we would, like for instance, going to Florida, we would actually go. Was it AAA or some other place?
Probably
And
AAA.
yeah, and like the person there would like take a highlighter and like highlight which route to take down. And it was like one of those huge foldable maps. Like I still remember that back in the day. So
Well,
that's one.
so I'm just going to comment on that. So I recently heard about I think it was called a triptych. I have no recollection of this, but apparently also at AAA you could go and they would print your route on like little pieces of paper, and you would just like rip them off as you made the turn or whatever.
Huh. Interesting.
Which sounds way simpler than trying to unfold and then refold one of those giant maps with the highlighting.
Yeah, it was definitely like my mom would be the navigator while my dad drove type of thing. But then you mentioned too that Maggie was in like the back seat listening to like a Walkman or something.
True.
So just a different type of gadget. And then I'm out.
Okay.
So because that kiss occurred in the dream, it doesn't count, does it?
Nope. Sorry.
Darn it.
I know.
But we still got to see a kiss, I guess. It just doesn't go towards our kiss count. I don't think we have anything to add to our other special shticks. So feature fun.
All right, so I'm going to start there. Next week there will be kissing. So
Ooh.
in air quotes reality, so they will count. Next week, Fran is going to follow Maxwell to London to try to rekindle the passion they had in Paris. To put it nicely, it does not go as anyone expected. Yes, there's kissing, but don't get too excited. So earlier in the scene, in this episode, Maxwell makes that comment to Fran, like you're not saying that you spend whatever it was, like you're not talking about me in therapy week after week after week. We do see Dr. Miller in season 5, and Fran goes to talk to him about her dad and her relationship with her dad. And she's like, okay, we need to like figure this out so we can get back to talking about Mr. Sheffield. As it turns out, Morty and Maxwell are more similar than we like to think. And that might be part of Maxwell's appeal to Fran. I'll leave that there. And then finally, when the Sheffields are planning to move to California at the end of season 6, initially Sylvia resists moving because she was at that point being pursued by a handsome, wealthy, doting doctor. And yes, Morty is still alive, if you're wondering. That's actually one of the episodes where we actually meet Morty Sheffield. Oh, sorry.
Morty
wow.
Fine.
Fine. I was like, that doesn't sound right. Why doesn't that sound right? Sorry. No, he does not. He does not change his name. Morty Fine. Boy.
Okay.
I'm doing great. All right. I'm out.
Okay. So now it's time for our episode rating. As a reminder to our lovely listeners, we rate each episode from 1 to 5 lipsticks, with 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. But we always reserve the right to adjust our ratings later because it's all made up. Like it doesn't mean anything.
Exactly.
Obviously, to the extent it's subjective, right? So anyway, I think this week it's my turn to go first.
I love when it's your turn.
Which, yeah, you do.
I really do.
I'm not as much of a fan. because I was trying to kind of think of how I feel about this episode. Um, I feel like there are other episodes I've enjoyed more. There are certain things that were said or little subplots in this that I wasn't as like keen on. You pointed those out as we were going through, um, including like the whole like Gracie thing. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. Um, like I appreciate the commentary, I guess, about mothers and daughters in terms like it can be a complicated type of situation, right? Um,
Mhm.
again, like I don't know. You see kind of the push pull between the relationship of Fran and Maxwell because on the one hand you have um her going to him in the middle of the night and him trying to like comfort her even though she woke him up. And then on the other hand you're at the Miss Universe contest and he's not paying attention and saying it sounds delicious, make a reservation, you know?
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know. I guess for now I'll 4. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I was kind of hoping your ranking would ground me one way or the other. Um,
Mhm.
I also don't really care for the Gracie subplot. It sort of feels unnecessary. Although, as a minor spoiler, in season 6, she continues to be eager to develop, which leads to an awkward conversation with her and Maxwell, who then basically wants to hand her off to Fran as quickly as he possibly can.
Mhm.
Um, because women's issues, men don't like to talk about them, as Fran pointed out to Maggie in season 1. um I don't care for that because like Gracie's still so little.
Mhm.
It sort of feels forced. I really didn't like Maxwell's total lack of attention to Fran,
Mhm.
um and his like fascination with the women at the Miss Universe contest. I did not care for that. I basically, like, anytime he's distracted by anyone, I'm not happy with that. Um,
Mhm.
I did like the, like, as you pointed out, the complicated nature of mother-daughter relationships, and Fran realizing she doesn't want her mom to move and then wanting her to move and all that. I
Sorry, I will add, I also liked the little Niles and Cece
Yeah, that's true.
setting up
That I
that date.
agree. I agree. I will also say this is not the last date they go on.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. I think I like this one about the same as last week. I can't tell if I really like it more or less, so I'm also going to give it a 4. I guess you did ground me in the end, so thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know. I just the Maxwell
Yeah.
thing really bugs me.
Uh-huh.
I don't care for that. I I didn't care for the Gracie thing.
Mhm.
Um, hmm. I
Yeah.
will note that there are some jokes that like we wouldn't have gotten when we were kids, like Anna saying, "Oh, that guy has great hands," and then that
Mhm.
last scene.
Yeah,
Um,
lighting up the cigarette.
mhm. eh, I can live with a 4, I think.
Okay, sounds good. Any final thoughts regarding this episode?
No. How about you?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited Nanny. Join us next time when we'll be discussing episode 101. Fran's Gotta Have It.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.